My earliest recollections are like old film stills, colored in shades of melancholic blue. My father was a mere silhouette in an old, faded photograph hidden in a dusty album, leaving us before I turned 6. My mother, Mary, became the overcast sky looming above our cramped apartment. One moment, she would be furiously cleaning the kitchen floor, muttering about a new beginning. The next, she would pull me into a tight embrace that left me gasping for air. These rare, breath-stealing hugs were the only tokens of love I yearned for. Mostly, I was just a quiet shadow following her around. She moved through our home, her face marked by deep lines of worry that seemed to pulsate with a life of their own. At times, when the creases on her forehead deepened and her expression grew tense, she would leave me with Mrs. Megan downstairs. When Mom returned, the air around us felt charged with an electric tension. She would casually tousle my hair with a sigh, a gesture that felt more obligatory than affectionate. Occasionally, a brief smile would light up her face, offering a fleeting glimpse of the warmth I so desperately sought. Then came John, a man whose eyes crinkled when he laughed, bringing a gentle calm to the stormy whirl of our lives. He treated me with a kindness that felt alien in our often tense home. After a particularly embarrassing day at school, thanks to Kathleen and her clique, I found solace in John's presence, tears clouding my vision. Why do they always pick on me? I mumbled into his shirt. The familiar ache of loneliness tightened around my chest. Kneeling before me, he looked into my eyes with a concern that was new to me. They pick on you because they're insecure, he whispered, wiping away a stray tear. They want to feel powerful by making others feel small. His words were a soothing balm to my bruised spirit, igniting a flicker of hope that perhaps things were looking up. But in my world, hope was a delicate butterfly, easily crushed. Then Betty arrived, a tiny, joyful bundle with eyes mirroring my mother's. Suddenly, I was no longer the center of attention. All the warmth and affection seemed to evaporate, replaced by a chilling indifference as my mother's focus shifted entirely to Betty, leaving me to fend for myself in the bewildering world of growing up. At 15, braces and a frizzy halo of hair framing my face, a knot of insecurity as big as Texas tightened in my stomach. It was also when my mother's negative attitude towards me flourished into a relentless barrage of criticism. On school picture day, she took the day off to perfect Betty's pigtails and choose the sparkliest dress for her. When it was my turn, she sighed, rummaging through my closet with frustration. Ugh, nothing decent in here, she complained. On the day of the photos, Betty shone like a little princess, while I stood out like a crumpled dandelion next to her radiant sunflower. My mother cooed over Betty's photo, giving me nothing more than a cursory glance and a dismissive grunt. John, bless his heart, tried to remain a positive presence in my life. He would sometimes take me shopping, helping me choose clothes that actually suited and flattered me. After a particularly tough day with my mother, I found comfort in his embrace, the need for comfort overwhelming. Dad. The word slipped out before I could catch it. He froze, a moment suspended in time, reflecting the complicated web of emotions and relationships that defined my family. Then, a look of pain flashed across John's face. Just then, my mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes ablaze with fury. You have one father, Carol, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. And trust me, he's all you deserve. Her harsh words hit me like a physical blow. John, feeling the mounting tension, clumsily ruffled my hair, trying to lighten the mood. Look, it's okay, he mumbled. It's not okay, I managed to say, my voice choked with tears as they started to spill over. Betty, ever observant, watched the drama unfold with a barely concealed smirk. Carol's been bad again, Daddy. She took my candy without asking. Life at 17 was a mishmash of first crushes, awkward school dances, and a perpetual knot of anxiety in my stomach. In our home, navigating the dating scene was particularly treacherous. Mom had a unique talent for undermining any potential romance before it could even take off. For example, there was Kevin, tall, humorous, with a smile that could thaw the coldest heart. After weeks of nervous texts and shy glances, I summoned the courage to ask him out. He said yes, and I was elated, though that joy was quickly overshadowed by the dread of him meeting my mother. The night Kevin came over, Mom was in rare form. She dragged out Betty's bedtime story to an excruciating length. When Kevin finally arrived, nervous but endearing, Mom greeted him with a smile that was all form and no warmth. "Carol never cleans her room," she declared offhandedly, as though she was commenting on the weather. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." My face burned with embarrassment. Kevin offered a nervous chuckle, but the silence that followed was painfully awkward. The rest of the evening spiraled into a disaster. Mom threw out snide remarks about my weight, my taste in music, and even my choice of college. By the end of the night, Kevin couldn't escape fast enough, leaving me feeling utterly deflated. This pattern repeated with each new guy I dared to bring home. Mom transformed into a maestro of backhanded compliments and subtle put-downs. My self-esteem plummeted, and any potential relationship evaporated faster than a sparkler in a rainstorm. By 19, amidst the chaos of college applications and nervous farewells, I was determined to escape the stifling atmosphere of my childhood. Senior year was my personal mission control, meticulously planning my escape into Betty's world beyond my mother's reach. I poured my soul into each college application, seeing every acceptance letter as a small victory, chipping away at the fortress of negativity my mother had built around me. Naturally, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a university across the state, her response was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Oh, Carol," she sighed, shaking her head melodramatically. "So far away. How will we ever see each other?" It was a question heavy with guilt, but I was no longer susceptible to her manipulations. "We can video chat, Mom," I responded firmly. "And there are these things called airplanes." John, my constant pillar of support, was overjoyed for me. "This is amazing, Carol," he beamed, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket on a chilly day. He might not have been my father by blood, but he was more of a dad to me than the man who had left us all those years ago. College was an eye-opener. Surrounded by people who knew nothing of my family history, I could finally breathe, experiment, and grow. It was my chance to redefine myself, to build a new life on my terms, far from the shadows of my turbulent childhood. Finally, I found myself in an exhilarating new chapter where I could truly breathe and thrive. Surrounded by the vibrant pulse of university life, I challenged myself academically and cultivated friendships that were both genuine and uplifting. At 28, the world of adulthood unfolded before me, complete with endless spreadsheets and a small apartment that felt like a sprawling castle compared to the confined spaces of my childhood. Life was, for the most part, genuinely good. I was engrossed in a career as an economist that kept my mind active, and Charles, my incredible boyfriend of several years, brought a kind of joy and laughter into my life that I had never known before. One evening, as we enjoyed takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, Charles, smiling that endearing goofy grin I adored, dropped a significant suggestion. "I think it's time we met each other's parents," he said. My stomach did a somersault at the thought. Meeting Charles's parents turned out to be a breeze. They lived in a charming house with a backyard fragrant with freshly cut grass. They welcomed me warmly. His mother, Emily, enveloped me in hugs, and his father, Jacob, kept us laughing all evening with his jokes. It was normal and heartwarming, a stark contrast to the family dinners of my past. However, the idea of Charles meeting my family filled me with dread. How could I possibly explain the years of emotional neglect and constant criticisms, or the heavy cloud of negativity that hung over my childhood? I shared everything with Charles, the arguments, the tears, and how my mother and Betty had slowly eroded my self-esteem. Betty had evolved into a skilled manipulator, adept at pressing just the right buttons. Charles listened patiently, his hand reassuringly on mine. "Carol," he said with conviction, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They might come with baggage, but you are the prize." His words were a salve to my wounded spirit, affirming his unwavering support and love. It gave me hope that perhaps I could create my own family, one filled with the love, acceptance, and laughter I had always longed for. With a mix of nerves and excitement, I dialed John's number. "Hey, John." I greeted him after he picked up, his voice as cheerful as ever. Taking a deep breath, I plunged into the news about Charles, our engagement, and the upcoming wedding. A pause followed my torrent of words, and then John's laughter rang through the phone, warm and genuine. "Carol, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both," he exclaimed. His enthusiastic response helped soothe some of my anxiety. "Listen," he continued, "you've got to bring him over for dinner. Let me meet the guy who finally snagged you." Charles, always supportive, agreed eagerly. So, a few weeks later, we found ourselves pulling up to my childhood home, a place that still stirred a complex blend of nostalgia and apprehension within me. My mother answered the door, her expression morphing into a surprised smile. "Carol, you came to visit. And who is this handsome fella?" "This is Charles, my fiancé," I replied, managing a tight smile. Charles stepped forward, offering his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Judy." My mom beamed, shaking his hand with a bit too much enthusiasm. "The pleasure's all mine, dear." "So, Charles, what do you do for a living?" Charles, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents of my mother's question, launched into a detailed explanation of his work, his enthusiasm undimmed by the complex dynamics of my family. As the director at a major corporation, John played his role of charming host effortlessly, filling the dinner with jokes and captivating stories to keep the conversation lively. Betty, however, was not one to be outshined. Throughout the meal, she batted her eyelashes at Charles, frequently interrupting our conversation to quiz him on every detail of his job and hobbies. Mom, always the attentive mother, hung on every word from Betty, creating a stark contrast to the subtle jabs she threw my way. "Carol, honey," she would say with a tone dripping in feigned sweetness, "you really should take some fashion advice from Betty. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering." Charles, bless his heart, seemed to miss the undercurrents of tension. But I knew exactly what was happening. Mom was undermining me, trying to make me feel small and insecure in front of my fiancé. The dinner felt like a distorted performance, a play where I was constantly reminded that I wasn't good enough, pretty enough, or successful enough. By the time dessert was served, I was ready to escape as soon as it was remotely polite. We made our excuses and left. As soon as we were safely in the car, Charles let out a long sigh. "Your mom, she's quite the character, isn't she?" he remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Yeah," I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "She can be something else." He squeezed my hand gently. "But hey, we made it through dinner, right?" He was right. We had survived, and despite Mom's negativity clouding the air, just holding Charles's hand gave me a sense of strength and reassurance. This was my future, one I was building with him, not with my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction lingered as Charles and I curled up on the couch that evening, flipping through wedding magazines. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a charming vineyard, surrounded by people who truly loved and supported us. It was perfect. But the next morning, the dream shattered. My phone buzzed with Charles's name, the cheerful ringtone replaced by a chilling ring that sent shivers down my spine. "Carol," he said, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We have a problem." My heart sank. "What's wrong?" I asked. Charles took a deep breath. "Your mom," he began, and the color drained from my face. "What did she do this time?" Charles explained that Mom, the master manipulator, had somehow gotten his work phone number. Instead of offering congratulations, she had unleashed a verbal tirade that would make a sailor blush. In her twisted view, I was the epitome of inadequacy, ugly, dull, and socially awkward. Worse, she had brought up my father's abandonment as if it were a weapon and suggested that Charles should leave me for Betty, claiming my younger sister was the epitome of beauty and brains. Fury boiled up inside me, a hot, venomous rage. How dare she try to sabotage my happiness again? Charles, equally furious, channeled his anger into an unexpected plan. A bold, thrilling strategy to expose her. "We set a trap," he said, his jaw clenched. The plan was simple. Charles would call Mom back, pretending to be swayed by her words, and arrange a meeting to discuss her ludicrous proposal. The goal was to record the entire conversation on his phone. Charles made the call. His voice was smooth and convincing, and Mom, completely oblivious to the trap being set, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous laugh bubbled up from my chest. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was underway. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. We were not going to let her manipulations dictate our future. But one thing was clear. I was no longer going to let my mother control my life. This time, the tables had turned, and I was prepared to take a stand. Fueled by a mix of righteous anger and a desperate need for change, I decided to face her directly at their meeting. The very idea of confronting her, even under the guise of a stranger, sent chills down my spine, but my resolve was stronger than my fear. Dressed in casual jeans and an old t-shirt, I donned a pair of thick, black glasses to complete my disguise. I positioned myself in a bustling cafe across the street from where my mother and Charles were scheduled to meet, becoming just another face in the crowd. As I sat in a corner booth, my stomach twisted into knots of nervous anticipation. I watched as my mother strutted into the cafe, a look of triumph plastered across her face. She found Charles seated in a secluded corner of the room, her smile broadening at the sight of him. This was it, the commencement of Operation Momzilla Takedown. Charles, with his knack for technology, had discreetly activated a recording app on his phone. Positioned nearby, I listened intently, my heart pounding as their conversation unfolded. The conversation began innocently enough, with Charles playing his role perfectly. Then, without hesitation, my mother launched into her venomous tirade. "You know, Charles," she began, leaning in with a conspiratorial air, "between you and me, Carol just isn't wife material." My blood ran cold. The woman who was supposed to protect and support me was openly criticizing me for the man I loved. "She's, well, a bit simple," my mother continued, her tone dripping with feigned sympathy, "and not very pretty either, if you know what I mean." Charles, maintaining an excellent poker face, simply nodded, offering vague responses. Inside, I knew he was seething with anger. My mother's voice then dropped to a whisper. "But Betty, now there's a girl with potential. Smart, beautiful, and she knows how to navigate society." It was almost laughable. Betty, with her shallow personality and lack of ambition, was suddenly the epitome of elegance and intelligence in my mother's eyes. The conversation was a masterclass in manipulation. My mother, blinded by her delusions, even confessed to never loving my stepfather, admitting she had married him only for his wealth. The depths of her shamelessness knew no bounds. After an eternity, my mother stood, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "Well, Charles, it was lovely meeting you. Think about what I said," she purred, patting his hand with her manicured nails as she left the cafe. Stunned and disgusted, I remained in my hiding spot. "So, what now?" I asked Charles once we were alone, my voice tight with emotion. He pulled me into a hug, his embrace a comforting shield against the storm of emotions. "Now," he said firmly, "we expose her." The air crackled with determination. The weekend that followed, I walked into my childhood home, where my mother's smug smile instantly set my teeth on edge. "Carol, honey, you won't believe it," she gushed, unable to contain her excitement. "What's that, Mom?" I asked, bracing myself for the inevitable. "Charles," she declared, her voice dripping with twisted satisfaction, "has decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Betty." My heart stuttered, but I managed a forced smile. "That's great, Mom. Happy for them." My stepdad, perpetually bewildered, cleared his throat awkwardly. Betty, lounging on the couch like royalty, let out a snide laugh. "Apparently not, Dad. Carol just wasn't good enough for him." But I stood my ground. the recorded proof of her deceit tucked safely in my pocket, ready to bring down the facade of lies she had built around us. This was the moment of truth, and I was ready to reclaim my life from her manipulative grasp. Ignoring Betty's snide comment, my focus was fixed on Mom's self-satisfied expression. It was time for the truth. Calmly, I began, "Actually, Mom," my voice steady, surprising even myself, "Charles is right here." At that moment, Charles entered with a mischievous grin, immediately capturing the room's attention. "Hi, everyone," he greeted cheerily, just in time for a little family drama. With a flourish, he pulled out his phone and hit play. The room fell deathly silent as my mother's voice, dripping with malice, filled the space. The entire cafe conversation, her harsh words about me, her undue praises for Betty, and her shocking admission about marrying my stepfather for his wealth, played out. The color drained from Mom's face with each damning sentence. My stepdad's complexion turned pale, his jaw slacks with disbelief. Betty's facade of confidence shattered, replaced by a whimper of fear. When the recording ended, a heavy silence hung over the room before my stepfather finally exploded. "You lying snake," he roared, fury shaking his voice. "You married me for money?" For the first time in my life, Mom looked genuinely lost, her eyes welling up with tears, but the anger on my stepfather's face was too intense to ignore. "I want a divorce," he declared, his voice thick with resolve. "Get a lawyer." The room imploded into chaos. Mom and Betty burst into tears, their cries a cacophony of misery and self-pity. Charles, caught in the storm, looked utterly out of place, but amidst the upheaval, I felt an unexpected calm. The ugly, raw truth was out, shattering years of manipulation and lies. The weeks that followed were a blur. My stepdad moved through his days with a somber air, his sobs often heard late at night. Betty threw icy glares my way whenever we crossed paths. Mom, the architect of our family's downfall, retreated into a social media blackout. As for me, I felt a hollow emptiness. The anger that had driven me seemed to evaporate, leaving a void that needed filling. One sunny afternoon, as I listlessly flipped through wedding magazines that now seemed like relics from another era, Charles joined me on the couch. "Hey," he said, concern coloring his tone. "You all right?" I managed a weak smile. "Yeah, just thinking. Everything feels so different now." He pulled me into a hug. "It is different. But hey, different can be good. It's a chance to start fresh, you know?" His words, gentle and encouraging, nudged me toward a new perspective. Maybe he was right. Perhaps the void left by my mom could be filled with something new, something exciting. A spark of mischief lit my eyes as I looked up at him. "So, what do you say we do something crazy?" Charles's eyebrows rose. "Crazy like what?" "How about a road trip?" I suggested, a grin spreading across my face. "Just us, a map, and the open road. No expectations, no timelines, just pure adventure." "You had me at road trip," he declared, his enthusiasm matching mine. So we shifted gears. Our carefully planned vineyard wedding was swapped for a spontaneous cross-country adventure. We packed an old camper van with essentials, plenty of snacks, a killer playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road. With no set destination, we embraced the promise of new experiences and the joy of shared memories. Fast forward a year, Charles and I stood at an altar, not in a vineyard, but under a canopy of fragrant flowers in a beautifully improvised ceremony. It wasn't the elaborate event I had once imagined, but it was perfect in its spontaneity and sincerity, a true celebration of where our journey had taken us. The wedding was nothing short of perfect. Instead of facing a disapproving mother, my recently divorced stepdad, who had become estranged from Betty, walked me down the aisle. The tears in his eyes as he walked beside me were tinged with a mix of pride and regret. As he squeezed my hand gently, he whispered, "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after." It was a moment of heartfelt sincerity that I would cherish forever. Life after the wedding settled into a pleasant and familiar rhythm. Charles and I built our life together, one filled with laughter, love, and the occasional spontaneous road trip adventure that kept our spirits high and our bond strong. My stepdad, freed from the shadows of his past relationships, became a regular visitor in our home. He delighted us with tales of his travels and often dropped not-so-subtle hints about his eagerness to embrace the role of a grandfather soon. Each time he mentioned it, I would laugh and assure him, "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever." These moments, simple yet profound, marked a new chapter in our lives. They were built on the foundations of understanding, acceptance, and a redefined sense of family that went beyond past conflicts. We had transformed our struggles into strengths, and with each passing day, the life we were crafting together grew richer and more fulfilling.